We'll review about this. The key zones, this is some things I've drawn out here. A key zone here, we have a key zone here, it's assigned to one key. It's one sample on this one key, and here's like one sample across a whole bunch of different keys. Key zones are for the samples. So if you have a sample, it's across which keys does it go across, that's your key zone there. And if you have multiple samples, they're each gonna have their own key zones. Within a key zone, there's a root note, and that root note is associated with that key zone. That's the note that plays the sample back at its original pitch. The root note does not have to be inside the key zone. So if I go over here, take a look at this one here. This is the key zone for that sound right there. If I move this root note, you can see I'm moving it outside the key zone, and it makes it higher up. If I go over this way, makes it lower down. The root note does not have anything to do with these other key zones here. When I go click on this one here, so it has to do with which note is playing that original sound back its original pitch, but you can move that root note anywhere on the keyboard you want. Velocity zones work the same way. So for example, if I wanted to put these two on top of each other, so let's say I want to take this one and I can adjust my velocity zone like this, and I can adjust here. Let's move it up like this actually. And I can just click and drag it up and down. This is what's really nice. Again, every sampler is a bit different. This is how Kontakt works, which is one of the reasons why I really like it, because it's very easy to use. And I can take this and I can move it left and right like this. So now I can move it. So when I play it quietly, when I play the velocity, lower velocity, it plays this note, and if I hit it harder, it plays that note. Like that. That's how that works there. So, you know, it's the same as your key zones, but it's just for your velocity instead of your key zones. Then we can have groups. Using groups means I don't have to assign samples one-to-one to an output. For example, if I have several different outputs going on and I want to have 5 different samples go into that one output, or output number 2 or output number 3, I can just have them be in the same group. Or I can also assign a filter to that group overall. And that's what groups are for. So you have your key zones, which are your individual samples, and you have groups, which are combining groups of samples together. All right, now let's talk about looping. Okay, so let's say I'm going to grab a drum loop here. Go in here to my samples, and let's grab a drum loop here. Let's go back over here. I'm going to go back to my sample phonics, because those are a little bit more interesting than the other ones. Let's grab a flute loop, or let's see here, Pandiera. Here's a loop here. Cool. Let's grab them, see. Yeah, cool. So I'm going to grab this one right here, and drag it in, C3. Okay, so you can see what's going on here is I've got this here, just putting it across the different keys here. Okay, drag this in. This is here, turn this grid off. There we go. And it dragged it in, everything is in one. It turned off it put everything at the same pitch, so. And I forgot why it does, how we can stop it from doing that. Okay, well, I'm not going to worry about that right now. Let's focus on looping, which is what I want to focus on. So we're going to turn this loop on here. And the way we do this is down here, see where it says sample loop? In my wave editor, sample loop, I can turn that on. I just click on the one key there, it turns on the loop. And now what I can do is move this over so I can actually loop a part of the sample here. Why are you not looping? Hold on. It dragged it in and it did all sorts of weird stuff. I'm just going to start over with a new instrument here because I'm not sure why it dragged it in like that. Oh, it's because it's an acidized wave. Ah. All right. So we'll not use that one there. I've never dragged in an acidized wave before. Because I always usually just drag these into Ableton Live, and Ableton Live doesn't deal with acidized waves. So let's go back over here to our pajama beats, which were not acidized waves. And we'll grab these electronic beats. Let's grab the Foley beats here. Nope. I'm just gonna... Well, I like the electronic beats better. So we'll grab this King beat, the same beat we were using earlier. And I'm just going to go ahead into my wave editor here. There we go. Okay. And I'm just going to loop a certain part of this. So the way we do this is turn on my sample loop here, turn that on there. And this is supposing it's not an acidized loop like we were just messing around with. And I'm going to go over here and adjust this loop point here and this loop point here. So now it just loops that one part like that. And it does it no matter what key I press. And we've got a loop. And that loop, and actually it seemed to loop pretty well just by doing it kind of like eyeballing it there. So it actually sounds pretty good. So what this means basically is that if I wanted to, I can just right. So with that there, you can hear how it just sounds nice and looped out. Let me just drag these over. And that's because I did a pretty good job of looping it there. But we could also adjust this loop. I'm going to zoom in on this. And I can move this over like this. You know, I can also adjust the start and end points of this thing. Right, I can move this over to anywhere I want. So you can hear how that works. Now, Kontakt has a really cool grid function here where I can turn that on and I can actually lock it into my grid. And the way it knows what the grid is because you tell it how many bars it is. So it's 1 bar, 2 bars, 4 bars. If it's not correct down here, if I know what the tempo is, I can just type it in by hand, or well, I actually adjust it up like this or down. But it's pretty easy to adjust it if you know what that grid is. If you don't know what it is, you can just kind of earball it and just listen to it and make sure it sounds good. But with the grid, what's nice is that it will it'll automatically lock into things. So pretty cool there. Now, what I like to do also is I like to use this, oops, I didn't mean to close that. I meant to close this. I like to use this grid for other things that aren't necessarily actually like a tempo. So let's take this out, and I'm going to remove this beat here. Let's put an instrument in here, something that's got like a long decay. So I'm not going to save the changes there, and let's go back to, let's see, things that resonate. Bells, here we go. So we have this. Yeah, here we go, this is pretty cool. Yeah. Okay, let's use this one here. So I've got this in here. I'm going to go ahead and open it up, and I go to my mapping editor, and if I play it, so you can hear me playing that. Go to my wave editor down here, and what I'm going to do in my wave editor is I'm going to go ahead and turn on my grid and tell it that my grid is at 80 BPMs. Like, there we go. And we got all these here. Cool. Yeah, that works like that. I thought you used to be able to click in it, but I don't know. I haven't actually. I know what's going on here. So this is Kontakt 6, and I'm mostly used to Kontakt 5. Anyway, so we got this bell loop here, and I'm gonna go ahead and put a loop in here, and I'm gonna adjust the loop so we can see we've got our grid points here, and I can adjust the width on these, so we can have like an 1/8 note width. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna adjust my length here, so it's like a like that. So if I play. Okay, I might want to make this a little bit like that, and I'm going to zoom in on it. And you can see how we're looping it, and it's kind of got a rhythmic loop to it now. And it's at 80 BPM, which is what my song is at. Okay. And you're going to hear that it will be rhythmic. Which is a pretty cool little sound. And you can hear how it's looping rhythmically there. If I don't want it to loop rhythmically, I can just turn the grid off, and I can set it to however I want. Now, usually when you're dealing with samples, you see how it's got like this crossover point here. If I zoom in, I'm going to zoom into this part right here. Move this over like that. I'm going to move this over so you see how it kind of goes up and down here. I'm going to take that, and I'm going to go over here to crossfade. I'm going to set this to my loop edit, and I'm going to crossfade this. Let's crossfade it by 500 there. And we're going to adjust this here so these 2 points here kind of line up with each other. Kind of like that. So that'll kind of help get rid of, basically what we want to do is get rid of any pops and clicks that are in here. And now it doesn't have any pops and clicks in it. We can also do different loop times like this. I can loop it back and forth. Like this. But you hear, even though this is not a rhythmic sound, you can hear there's like a sense of rhythm in there. So you kind of want to be aware of that kind of stuff too when you're dealing with samples. Okay, so cool. So we have our sample point, our start point of our sample, start and end point of our sample, and then we have our loop start and loop end here. The loop start and end points do not have to be the same as the sample start and end points. So a couple things what we just talked about with Kontakt here. The mapping editor allows you to edit your key and velocity zones and your root note. The wave editor is for sample editing, loop setup, your grid. In here we have our sampler engine in our source area. The sampler engine, basically what this does is tells how Kontakt is going to deal with our samples. Each sample here, and that's right here in the source section here. And there's several different parts, several different ways to do this. We have sampler, which is the standard basic sampler. Everything loads into your RAM, and so the more samples you have, the more RAM you have to have. But my computer has 32 gigs of RAM, so I don't really ever have to worry about it too much. We have DFD. We're going to come back and talk about DFD in just a second. We have this new one here, which is Wavetable, which can do some pretty cool stuff. I haven't really explored all these possibilities yet. Then we have Tone Machine, Time Machine Pro, and Beat Machine, these here. These are all basically elastic audio or warping setups here. So, for example, if I want to throw a beat loop in here, but I don't want that beat loop to change the pitch when I'm adjusting my tempo or when I'm playing different notes. Let's go back over here to, let's use something from Dirty Flute here. We got this one here. So if I hit play on this, okay. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust my wave to this here. I'm going to start there. Okay, cool. So I got that. So if I play this on different notes, you can hear it's adjusting my speed as well, right? Which is the normal thing, that's what we just talked about. But if I go back into my source and I change this to Time Machine Pro, now watch what happens when I play different keys on my keyboard. So if I hit play on this, and it sounds really good. So every different note I play doesn't adjust my speed or my pitch or anything like that. It's just, it adjusts the pitch but not the speed. So this is what Time Machine Pro is really good for. You can also say, okay, I like this pitch, but I want it to be a different speed, so I can just go over here and adjust my speed right here. So I can slow it down, I can speed it up. Right? And it sounds fantastic. This is one of the better sounding warp engines in the industry as far as I'm concerned in Kontakt. So whenever you hear people are doing these like hip hop beats or trap beats that have like pitched up vocals and things, but they're not super sped up, that's what they're using. They're using Kontakt to kind of create those sounds, which is a pretty cool thing. And if you want to know more about doing that, we can certainly do that. Cool. The natural modes in there are the sampler, DFD, S1200, and MP60. That's these right here. We're talking about this part here. So these ones are S1200, MP60, sampler, DFD. These are all like what I would call the natural modes. That means that it's going to adjust the speed and the tempo together. The speed and the pitch together. And then we have warp modes, which is Time Machine Pro and Beat Machine. These are going to disconnect, and so you can separate your pitch from your speed. Cool. All right. So all the modern samplers will allow you to choose how the audio is played back. It's at natural or warped. Natural is just the normal old school playback. The pitch affects the speed. Warp disconnects the pitch from the speed. Think of like Pro Tools Elastic Audio, Ableton Live warping, stuff like that. Just remember that warped playback uses more computer processing power than natural playback does. So if you're using a lot of samples that are warped, that have the like Time Machine Pro turned on, stuff like that, then it is going to eat up your computer's processor power a lot more. And finally, direct from disk, DFD, is something that's more modern. It's a Native Instruments thing. As far as I know, it's a Native Instruments thing. Basically, it means that it plays it back directly from your hard drive and not from the RAM. So if you have samples, like for example, a piano sound, and if we wanted to go in here, let's just go in here and take a look at this. You know, the normal way to use Kontakt and the way that you've got it in your Kontakt player, I'm going to go ahead and make a new instrument track here. So in here, if I go in here, I load up Kontakt. And if I turn my browser back on, these are already instruments that already have samples built into them. They have all the samples in them. So if I want to grab a piano, let's grab the Maverick piano, for example. I'm just going to drag it over here, and you notice that it's loading samples up. We can see this RAM memory is climbing up right here. It's loading the samples into my RAM from my hard drive. And you can see this little line going across here showing me where we are, how completed we are. And I've got it set a really high sample load count, which you can change in your preferences here. Load import, where is it, memory? Yeah, this one here. Oh, I didn't have this set up. There we go. Let's change that too. So I have 30 gigs of RAM available to use. So I can load these sounds up into here a lot more. And I'm not sure if I just crashed it or if it's just still waiting for stuff. Maybe I shouldn't have set up like this. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, cool. Let's just see what happened there. Yeah, I got it set all the way up to the top. So 240 kilobytes, the preload size. So basically what is going to happen is it's going to load up all my samples into my RAM just a little bit at the beginning of it. It's going to load more so it can actually play back stuff easier. But then the rest of the piano sound is going to play back from my hard drive. So you see here, this little red part here is loaded up into the RAM and it plays it back from my hard drive. So if I play this piano sound, it's this beautiful piano sound, and it sounds really, really realistic. The reason why it sounds so realistic is because they've sampled every note of this piano. But pianos can play for a very long time. So if I play this and I hold it down, it's playing the sound for like 10 seconds. That's a lot. Wait, actually more than 10 seconds. So if we go and do the math on this, let's say that it's got each piano sample is like 30 seconds. That's a little bit overestimated here, but let's say there's 88 keys on a piano, and let's say you sample 5 velocities and they're 30 seconds each. That's 13,000 samples seconds. That's 220 minutes, or 3 hours and 40 seconds. 3 hours and 40 minutes. That's like 3.5 gigabytes approximately. So that's going to be too much for especially older computers. It's going to be too much for their RAM, because most computers, especially older ones or factory shipped ones, only have 4 to 8 gigs of RAM. So if you load up one instrument, you've already used up most of your RAM. So that's where direct from disk comes from. Direct from disk, basically what it does, it allows you to load the little part of each one and then get the rest from your hard drive. Oh, what's up, Paul? How you doing? So that's what direct from disk does. It's not something that I use. Oh my God, Giga Sampler? Yeah, totally. totally remember that one. I never used it though. I didn't use Gigasampler. I went straight into Native Instruments, and I used hardware samplers before that. So essentially, this is really good to use for big samples, pianos, and things like that. It's not really great to use for if you're just putting drum kits in there. So usually what I do is in here, I'll go in and turn off the DFD for if I'm just making my own samples. I like to turn off my DFD. But sample libraries, you can have all sorts of cool stuff in them. So for example, I just got this new sample library here that's the Olafur Arnolds from Spitfire. Huge fan of this one here, so let's go ahead and use this composer toolkit here. And here, this one has some great, let's actually use the felt grand piano mixed. I'm going to drag this in, and it's going to load it up. So it loads it up like this. And then once it gets it loaded here, it's going to load it into the memory. And we can see this little line going across here, how much is going to load into the memory. There we go, half a gig, and we play. Beautiful sound there, and it's actually, we can mix it here. It's got two sets of samples running at the same time. So I can get my ending part. Really beautiful sound. We have different stuff in here as well. Yes. So let's load this one up with two different microphones in here. Big fan of this one though. This is all Olafur Arnold's stuff. One of my favorite composers. Modern. One of my favorite modern composers, I should say. So you can turn on these mics here. Turn them both on. So you can see here we're getting up to almost a gigabyte stuff. Adjust the levels of these. So, pretty cool stuff there. If I go back into my libraries, my Kontakt libraries, lots of different sounds in here, lots of different stuff, like for example, string ensembles, things like that. Let's go ahead and let's use the cellos to check this out. And we can see how it's loading it up. And what you always want to do is you always want to wait for it to load up. You can see these little dots here, these dashes. So it's got yellow dash here, which means you could play it, but it's still going to be missing some samples. And now that it's over here in the white one, we can see it's loaded up. It's got 1.2 gigabytes. And you can see across the bottom down here are different colors of the keys. And what these are like the key mapping things. So one of the things that we can do with this is you can change, depending on which key you play on your keyboard. Where are we? There we are. I can change which sounds it's playing on the upper part of the keyboard. And really for this, you really want it to have like an 88 key keyboard. So you can hear how it changes the sound there. And it sounds pretty good. It sounds like real strings. And if you take time to program it in correctly, it's going to sound pretty amazing. This is all the stuff that comes with the complete like special edition. A lot of this stuff comes with that. So, and this is really where samplers shine nowadays. I mean, you could do a lot of really weird, cool things with them yourself, but one of the reasons why we use all the stuff we just talked about today is so we can get these really lush, very realistic sounds happening that sound acoustic and beautiful. And that's really what we're kind of, a lot of times, people are kind of going for, especially with Kontakt and some of these other ones. But yeah, I haven't thought about Giga Sampler for a minute. Cool, and I think that brings us pretty much to the end of stuff for today. And like I said, we're going to be using this as a launching off part. This is like an overview of sampling, and we're going to be using this as a launching off part for, we're going to come back and talk about Falcon tomorrow, and we're going to talk about, I want to show you the MPC Live, how that one works. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Ableton Live as well, and just how to use stuff in Ableton Live and how to do sampling in there. Cool. Any questions, I guess? Maybe we can hold off for Zoom today, talk about some questions in Zoom.